Hello, Vol Nation. Welcome to another episode of Believe in Tennessee Football. I'm your host, as always, Kyler Kerberson, joined with Reed Bacon. Got another great one here today. We're breaking down the back half of this last season, from Ole Miss all the way to Vandy, letting you know how we felt going into the game, how we felt during, what that game meant for us. Now looking back, how important was that game for our growth as a team? And before we get into that, we answer some questions you guys sent us. Are able to tell you what we thought, and by all means, these were amazing questions, and we really, really appreciate reaching out. So let's jump into it.
The game. Snap. The kick is in the air, and the kick this time is no, sir-ree. No, sir-ree. Final score, Tennessee 20, Florida 17. Pandemonium reigns.
Loads up, fires long for the end zone. The pass is going to be caught by Tennessee. Tennessee wins! Caught by Tennessee, Jawan Jennings. Jennings makes the catch in the end zone on the Hail Mary.
Down at the 35, to the 40, to the 45, to the 50, to the 45, to the 40, to the 35, 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. What did he do? All he did was score. Joey Pence, touchdown on play number 1.
Okay, so before we jump into the podcast, gotta shout out our number one sponsor, betonline.ag. You got to go there to bet on any games. Listen, football, full swing. We're getting into bowl games. We're getting into college football playoffs. It's getting a later half of the NFL, maybe some playoffs coming up. Basketball's in full swing. NBA, college basketball, now just starting up. To make all those games more exciting, you got to bet on them. Put some money down. It really gets the adrenaline going. So for stats, for odds, for spreads, everything that you need, betonline.ag is the place to go. Right now, they've just updated their desktop version of their website, so it looks brand new. So go there or on your mobile device, and when you sign up, you'll receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit if you use code BELIEVE50. That's BLEAV50. So make sure and use that when you first sign up, and you receive that 50% welcome bonus, which is just, hey, it's extra money. Why wouldn't you do it? So head on over to betonline.ag. It's the best place to do any bets. It's just the best sports book out there. So go on over. All right. Welcome in, everyone. Now we get to talk about the back half of the season. If you'll notice, me and Reed are wearing the exact same things if you're watching on YouTube, because we just started to record the second episode, the second half of the season. But before we get into that, and before we get into some of your questions you guys asked on Twitter, Reed, how we doing, bud?
Doing great. It's the exact same how I felt like last. You guys are getting this pod. You're getting the one pod 1 week, next pod the next week. I'm the exact same as I was last week in your eyes, but it's the exact same moment. So I'm all Gucci.
Yeah, I was on the fence about that, because I'm like, well, I mean, obviously Reed is doing the exact same that he was, but I got to start the podcast the same way. I can't change it up.
Nice little tradition.
That's exactly right. I want people to be very familiar that I say, hello, Vol Nation, that I say, how we doing, bud, that I say, all right, welcome in, everybody, that I say, as always, go Vols. Like, it's always the same every time. So they're familiar with the voice, I guess. Okay, so before we get into the games, before we break down the second half of the season, let's answer some questions from Twitter. So Reed posted the other day, next week we're doing a season recap. We wanted to know if you guys had any topics or any questions that you wanted to hear about. So we will start with the first one to answer, Mr. Stay Mad at LOL Stay Mad B. His first question, Hendon's highs and lows and the potential that he doesn't live up to expectations next season. So we mentioned this a little bit in the last pod about Hendon's success and him coming in the Pitt game and then starting to really grow into who he is. And we talked about this versus Purdue 2 weeks ago when we said, you know, the one thing in Hendon's game that isn't good is that deep ball. And for that to be the bad thing, in my eyes, is the best thing to be bad. But, you know, we're still expecting a lot of things out of him. Overall, I don't think that there will be a drop or a non-live up to the expectations of next year. I think expectations are very high. But I think he will do exactly what he did this year, if not better. I don't think it's really going to decrease. And the reason why is because of Josh Heupel, because of the offense that he runs, because mainly, and you mentioned this on the Purdue podcast, guys are getting wide open, not just kind of open, wide open. Wide receivers are running free out there on the field. And that was almost a slight at Mac Jones whenever he was playing, or all the quarterbacks that have come through Alabama, is that your wide receivers are wide open. Like, what are you really struggling with? And I think Josh Heupel is the reason why those guys are so wide open, which means they will be wide open next year. Completely expect it. And Hendon can only get better and be able to hit those deep shots. So I have high expectations for him. But I believe, again, that, you know, he can be a 30 touchdown, 5 interception guy and near 68% completion. And if you're on a winning team, maybe 10 wins or more, those are Heisman numbers. So, you know, the expectation of being like, hey, Hendon could be a Heisman favorite. Like, yeah, I see it. You know what I mean? I mean, what do you think about Hendon's highs and lows and if he'll live up?
I'll say, first off, I'm not blowing smoke. I'm not BSing. I really not only appreciate these questions that were asked, I actually think all of them were good questions. It wasn't, I jokingly say, it wasn't like one of these guys that calls in to sports talk and they're like, yeah, well, what do you think about so-and-so? And it's just like an opening question. Like, what do you mean when I think about Matthew Butler? Like, I think he's incredible. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, these were some good questions. And so I appreciate that. I'm going to go a little bit different from you. Hendon's highs and lows, I didn't feel like this year was a really big roller coaster ride with Hendon. I thought he was pretty much kind of what we expect. Like, once we saw him and once we watched him and once we understand who he was, I feel like that was kind of who he was. He's going to make some great plays with his legs. Sometimes he's going to maybe hold on to the ball a little too long. He's going to make some really good throws. Other times he's going to airmail it. Like, that's who he is. I think he's an above average, good college quarterback. I personally feel like he will not live up to the expectations of next year. And that is only because not necessarily Tennessee fans in general, but all fans in general get way too excited and blow stuff way out of proportion sometimes. And people in general have a really bad problem of, it's kind of like in society when people move on from something pretty quick. Like, everyone used to say, like, if you do something bad or something bad happens, don't worry about it, because in 30 seconds, someone else is going to do something more dumb or more insane, and they'll be talking about it. Well, just like when this season goes by and we kind of forget about this season, or maybe we forget about some of the low points, and then it goes into spring ball and they have him at, in Birmingham or Destin or wherever hell the meetings are, and they see Hendon and he's looking good and he's talking up, and all the reports are coming from spring practice how well he looked, and then the spring game he looks good, and then fall camping. So everything's going to be building. It's all going to be positive. So then going into next year, are people really going to remember exactly what he did, or are people going to just have built this persona of Hendon Hooker in their mind? And when I think that happens and people are going to say he's going to have a Heisman campaign next year, well, sure, there's a lot of people that have Heisman campaigns going into the year, but it's pretty rare that if some of those guys end up in New York. Spencer Rattler was like supposed to be a Heisman favorite, and guy gets benched and is now transferring schools. Like, it's just like, I just think the world and the sports world comes at you really fast. And so for me, I think he will be good next year. I do think that he will put in the work to improve. I do think our coaching staff is good and they will have him improve some. But no, I do not think that he's going to – I don't think he's going to be amazing. I think he's going to be really good, but I don't think he's going to be like incredible or amazing. Like, I don't think he's going to have one of those seasons. I do not think he'll end up in New York as one of the Heisman finalists towards the end of the year. So not to say that he won't have a good year, but I think expectations are really tough because people can put expectations on us that are sometimes not realistic.
I understand what you're saying, but my thought process is I feel like we have an understanding of who Hendon is. And like you said,
You and I do. I don't know about a bunch of other people.
Yeah, that me and you have an understanding of who Hendon is. And you said at the very beginning that, he's above average quarterback and he's a good quarterback. I mean, he is steady Eddie. Like, that's just who he is. I mean, almost 3,000 yards, 31 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He also had 5 rushing touchdowns. So there's not a lot of mistakes that the guy makes. He's 68% completion. And it's like, say we win 10 games next year and he has 3,500 with 36 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. And then also has, 8 or 9 rushing touchdowns. Like, those are Heisman numbers. That's all I'm saying is that, like, if he just improves a tiny bit on what he did this season, he could be considered in that talk, because I think we are underplaying his performance this year and who he was as a quarterback, like Mr. Consistent, very high passer rating, passer efficiency, very great touchdown interception ratio, and led this team to some big wins. So I just don't think – I think expectations will be very, very high, and maybe that's why he won't meet them, because they'll be so high.
I know. That's exactly what I was saying. But the other thing is, stats can play a picture, but you also have to see trust your eyes. So let me ask you this. You're throwing out all these numbers. Well, if he goes out and doesn't have one of his better games against a Florida or against a Pitt up at Pitt, or, some of these other, like, what about South Carolina when we play outside, whatever these games are, who cares if he throws up a bunch of tutties and yards against some of the lower competition? Because that happens a lot in college football, where you get some of these fake like you get the Iowas that haven't played anybody and they're 7-0 and they're ranked, top 5, and then they finally play someone that's halfway decent and they get blasted. Well, it happens with players too. A player rushes for this many yards or has this many receiving yards and, throws for this many yards. And I'm not saying that they're not good players, but they're not what people are making them out to be, because when they finally do show up, and that's kind of what people call those Heisman moments. Like, you got to have your Heisman moments. Okay, you got to have some big-time games against big-time opponents and in a big-time matchup. And so I'm fine, and I think he will have some good numbers, and I'm not talking poorly of him. My answer to the question is, I think he's going to be really good for us. I don't think he lives up to expectations, because I do not see him being in New York at the end of the year. Yeah. And I think that's what some people are going to expect, that not that he wins it, but he's at least there. And I don't see it. Will I be shocked? I won't be shocked, but I might be a little surprised.
Okay. Yeah, I'm probably seeing it from my expectations of Hendon. and not necessarily what the expectations will be headed into the first game.
I just know when I was watching Purdue, like I just talked about 2 pods ago on the Purdue pod, like I'm watching him miss wide open dudes. Like I'm missing him make some stuff, and then someone texts me and talks about his stats and all that. I'm like, great, man. Like stats are good, but like I said, instead of 2 tutties, he should have had 4. You know what I mean? So it's like, even if you go back and rewatch it, like he had Cedric Tillman. I don't like the play call, but technically he had Cedric Tillman who got held and it was a missed call, but he also had Velas Jones. If he hits either one of those, like it's the touchdown, the game's over. Like we're not kicking a long field goal. We're not going to overtime. Like I said, just give me 50%. So 50% is just hit one of those deep shots. Whether Cedric Tillman gets held or not, he was still overthrown. So, anyways, what's our next question?
Next one coming from the same guy. Wanting to talk about the bad third down defense that we've had this year. I think we had talked about it last pod about, there's just certain guys that aren't as good, like with the running quarterbacks we faced and it being 3rd and long and them taking off and we're not making that tackle. It's kind of in that realm where like, yeah, sometimes this guy's just not good, but other times I felt as if it was play calling, that there wasn't as much aggression with it. Because one of the most successful like 3rd and 4th down when
Kentucky.
we needed it was versus Kentucky.
Yeah.
And it was the last 2 plays, and we ran cover 0. I mean, it was man coverage. We blitzed the quarterback, made him uncomfortable, and it worked out great for us. He couldn't complete the pass. It was a lot of pressure in his face. And I don't know if I really saw that throughout the year. I saw it there, but that was it. So I think it is, and who knows, maybe Tim Banks wasn't aggressive because he wasn't confident in his guys. Because I think that's part of it too as a coach. Like, am I confident in these guys to execute this play, execute this blitz, execute this coverage? If I'm not, then I'm not going to call it. So
it's kind of damage control sometimes.
Yes.
Like we're all good, couch coordinators and head coaches, but like we don't know that we don't trust a matchup on the outside. So instead of calling cover 0, we're going to have 2-man where it's man coverage underneath and 2 high safeties up top. Now, I do agree that Kentucky game is very easy to point back to because it worked. I also think that he brought the blitz a lot more than people expected. A lot of stuff that I noticed, he was not walking guys up and showing, and then they came. It was a lot of show, and then they would bail. Like, I just feel like I noticed a lot this year. So say if you and I, or say the 2 linebackers were Jeremy Banks and Aaron Beasley in at the time, they would walk Banks up to show that he was coming, and he would end up dropping back, and then it was a delayed, and Beasley would come. And then there were times where they would both show, and they'd both drop back. I don't feel like we ever did the Baltimore Ravens, Steelers, sometimes Titans, more recently with Dean Pease. I just say it because I'm a Titans fan. I know, but like where you literally show, hey, my guy, we're coming. Like you're manned up, and we're bringing. Like I'm talking, everyone's on the line. That outside linebacker of, James Harrison back in the day, or Terrell Suggs back in the day. Like, bro, they're coming. Like, and we also got a DB and a nickelback coming. Like, I just feel like we did bring more pressure, but a lot of times it wasn't showing it. So maybe the fans didn't necessarily see it because when the ball snapped, a lot of fans are going to go to the ball. They're not watching who's coming. And the only reason I'm seeing this is because I'm going back and rewatching it and looking for this stuff. So I think Tim actually brought a lot of more blitzes than maybe people just didn't see because you're watching the ball, and when Beasley comes on a delayed blitz, but he gets picked up, you don't think it's a blitz because the quarterback's still in a pretty good pocket. So to answer the question, whether it's horrible third down defense or not, I think a lot of it is players. I mean, because a lot of our third down was when a quarterback ran and would get kind of, pick up those extra yards, whether it was like a little 3rd and 4 or was it the 3rd and 12 that Matt Corral would pick up. I still think the defense played well enough to win a lot of these games this year because they did do a good job in the red zone and at critical points in the game. And for me, that matters almost more. Who cares if they're a really good defense throughout the game and then they, as you like to say, they pee down their leg in the fourth quarter when we need them to make a big stop. They kind of bowed their necks up when they had to. So for me, whether we have bad percentages on third down, on horrible third down defense, I thought they still played well in short yardage when there was a lot of times this year where we needed to stop and get the ball back to their offense, and they did. There was other times this year where our offense put them in bad positions. A lot of times where they were going in and it was goal line or red zone, and they had to hold a team to a field goal.
Yeah, and it's also like the fact that we led the country and the nation in tackles for loss. It's like a lot of our third downs were third and long, and I think that almost makes it seem worse that they were third and longs that we were giving up. But overall, I mean, we said it, if not once, 100 times, that this is a bend, don't break defense, that they will let up those third downs, but when it comes time, they step up. I mean, that's literally how the Kentucky game felt, that when it needed to, the defense stepped up.
Well, so for me, I listen, I'm not a defensive coordinator. I'm not a, coach or whatever. But I do, like, people know that they listen, like they know I'm more of a defensive guy. Like I like defense more. I care about it more. And I don't care what level of football you're playing, but why the heck, in my opinion, and I'm not saying don't bring a blitz or play aggressive every now and then, but I'm a very much of a bend but don't break, because when you do get in the red zone, and and I'm not talking on the 1 or 2 yard line. I mean, that's really tough to stop someone. I'm talking like if you let a team in the 30 or the 20. A lot of college football now and a lot of football in general is spacing. And it's a lot of getting guys in space, and it's a lot of these. Well, what happens when you get down to the 30 or the 25 or the 18? All that stuff shrinks. You don't have as much room. So it's easier. And it's what I was going to say is, would you rather have a corner that gives up a 70-yard bomb and everyone else was doing their job, but you get beat over the top and it's a 70-yard bomb because you got all this room to run this? Or would you rather give up a 20-yard here, a 30-yard here, a 40-yard here, get some negative plays in there, and you look up and now it's 3rd and 8 on the 16-yard line and you make a stop? That's what really matters. I don't care that the team, when I go back and look at the box score and they gave up 410 yards, like, I don't care, because I remember when it was 3rd and 8 and they made the stop when they were supposed to and held a team to a field goal. So that's why for me, like, I didn't think like, he could be right. I could go look back and we might have had a terrible third down defense, but I felt like our defense played pretty well this year, not looking at the stats.
More of a feeling thing, more of an eye test thing.
Yes.
Last one from Stay Mad. Unexpected performances, bad or good? So just guys that I guess going into this season, not necessarily expecting. And either way they went. Do you have a guy in mind?
I'll go quick on these. I'm not going to elaborate on them because they're pretty self-explanatory. Guys that unexpected performances. Jalen Hyatt, I thought he was going to be good for us this year. He made some plays, but he was not what I expected. I don't think he was what a lot of people expected. You know what? I will say Joe Milton was kind of what I expected. I was not surprised by that. As much as I saw from him at practice, I was still so leery. Like, I love the saying, leopards don't change their spots. It's very rare for a guy to really improve or change who they are. So Joe Milton was kind of what I expected. I would say the defensive line and the defense as a whole was probably a little bit better than I expected. Obviously Theo Jackson is much better than I expected. I thought he'd be fine. Hell, I didn't think he was going to end up being one of the best players on the team and one of our leaders on defense. Same thing with Matthew Butler. Byron Young was about what I expected. Caleb was better than I expected. Jay Blakely was a hell of a lot better than I expected. Tyler Barron was about whatever. Aaron Beasley was better than I expected. Jeremy Banks was about what I expected.
You gonna mention everyone?
Well, calm down. I'm just kind of saying, like, I'm just kind of I'm not spending a lot of time talking about a bunch of. I'm just kind of saying, like, who was a big, but for me, if I just had to pick one, like, I mean, if I really have to pick one, like I don't, yeah. So Jalen Hyatt on offense, and then I'll say Cedric Tillman on offense. So one was Jalen Hyatt wasn't as good, and Cedric Tillman was a hell of a lot better than I expected. And then defensively, I'll say Matthew and Theo. I did not expect them to be dogs like they were, and they were dogs.
Yeah, I think those two were the ones on defense where it was just like I did not. In no way was I like, ooh, I wonder what Theo Jackson is going to do this year. And, you know, I said it in the middle of the season where I thought like he was an MVP of the defense. And, you know, you have loved Matthew Butler all season, but like you didn't necessarily think, oh, he's going to be like that going into it. So I agree with both of those. I love that Jalen Hyatt. I really wasn't even thinking about that, but I love your point there with Jalen Hyatt. I mean, and Cedric Tillman. I would throw Javonte Payton in there, where I didn't expect that out of him like right away. I thought, like I even mentioned when he transferred in, like, oh, you're gonna be a great number 3. Like, cool. And I mean, I don't know if I expected the play out of Hendon that happened this year. I didn't see that necessarily happen. I didn't really see him as anything. And he was here in the spring and we still didn't see it out of him. So I think those were very unexpected on that side of the ball. But all right, let's jump into the next person. Zach Edens asks, would love to hear who y'all's unsung hero of the team was. We all know Hooker and Theo and Alante were amazing, but who doesn't get enough credit for how good of a season they had? I'm going with Jerome Carvin. He played insanely well for us this season. That's what Zach says. Zach, I agree with you. I agree with Jerome Carvin. When I saw him in training camp, I told you, and I said in the pod, that was our best offensive lineman, and he turned out to be that. You know, I wouldn't say it was unexpected, but I would say he's unsung because he's an offensive lineman. I mean, that's just how it is with offensive linemen. You don't necessarily talk about him as much, and I think he was an unsung hero. I would also say Matthew Butler, because I think we were the only podcast or Tennessee anything that was talking about how great Matthew Butler was. And especially you and the difference that he was making, the pressure he was getting in the backfield. And like, I guess it's just another lineman thing where people just don't necessarily pay attention to that. And then last one for me, and I just said him, but Javonte Payton. Like, I think he's not necessarily seen as a big a deal as Cedric Tillman. Like, Cedric Tillman's kind of taken over, but right there in the middle of the season, I mean, Javonte went 4 or 5 games to the touchdown, and he was number 1 target for Hendon and really, like, helped the team during the season. So even though Tillman was seen as like, oh, this is a beast, like this guy is insane, it's like, hey, don't forget about Javonte and how he got us here and like his performances, you know, versus Florida, Missouri, South Carolina. Like, he was balling out.
Yeah. My unsung hero is Josh Heupel. No, so I mean, for me, it's Matthew Butler. I will always think back to after all those guys transferring and Matthew stepping up to that podium and commanding the team in a way. And I mean, like he was telling media, he's like, if you don't want to be here, see ya. These guys here, we're going to work hard. We're going to bust our butt. And I remember being like, yeah, guy, sweet, my dude. Like, that always sounds good, but like, are you even going to be good this year? Like, are you just going to be a rotational guy? And I was dead wrong. And he came out and he balled. And I felt like very early on, like that pit game, I just start seeing his hands and I start seeing his pressure and I start seeing his activity. And I'm like, dude, this, and he never, every week he did it. So for me, it's definitely Matthew Butler. And I'm definitely a fanboy of his, and I'm going to see, you know, what happens. And who knows if he ends up doing anything in the NFL, but I'll be watching him, and I'm definitely he'll always be, one of the guys that I really enjoyed while he was at UT. So
yeah, I mean there are quite a few of those guys that come through where you don't really appreciate it then, or pay attention to him then, but then you think back and you're like, dang, I really like the way that guy played. Like I always appreciated his effort and his ability on the field. So I think he definitely fits in that category. Okay, last question before we jump into the season. From Aaron Heiss. How can the drop back passing game improve? Too many times the plays seemed dialed up, quote unquote, and not reading the defense or going through progressions. The way I look at this and the way I look at this question, I remember the offense that I ran at Tennessee with Josh Dobbs. I remember the kind of plays that we had and how we took advantage of defenses. And it wasn't the drop back passing game. It was a play action pass. It was a read option with a screen on it. It was a read option counter with a tight end headed down the seam. So my thing is, I don't necessarily want to even concentrate on the drop back passing game. I would rather put those wrinkles that I just said into it. And I don't think there was enough of that. I don't think there was the rollout, using emotion, getting a guy open near the goal line, where we did that all the time when I was there. So it gave, a play action with a running back, and then Josh rolls out to his right or to his left, has the ability to run it if he wants, but then also has two guys, one guy in the flats, one guy head to the corner. So it's just a lot of options on the play. I saw that offense opened my mind to how options on the play can really help you have success, where Josh could make the decision of handing it off, keeping it himself, passing it upfield, or passing it, short. And it's just like, we have multiple options. In this offense with Heupel, and I love Heupel, there are literal play designs where there's one option, and that is it. So I think it's just getting to the point where Hendon is comfortable enough to have multiple options and make the right decision. As soon as Josh Heupel has that trust in Hendon, then I feel he will integrate those kinds of plays. And in turn, those kinds of plays can help with the deep ball and with the drop back pass and with like the third and longs when you have to just do like a 6-man protection and drop back and pass, and there's not like a play action to it. But I think Hendon knows, hey, the part of my game that's weak is the deep ball, and I need to work on it. So I think just getting reps at it is what's going to make him a better deep thrower.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and it's a good catch by this individual to notice these things. But for me, I almost think drop back football is, in a way, kind of going by the wayside, especially in college. I mean, in the NFL, I swear to you, I still feel like there's some guys in the NFL, they're getting one or two reads and that's it. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm a huge Ryan Tannehill fan, but I find myself defending him a lot because a lot of people will come at me and say he's not that good. He's a game manager. He's only good because of Derrick Henry and now A.J. Brown and this stuff. And I'm like, no, you guys are wrong. I've watched every snap of his since he took over, which means I watched every snap of Marcus Mariota. There's a huge difference between not good quarterback play, average quarterback play, and above average quarterback. I'm not going to say that Ryan Tannehill can win you a game and put a team on his back. I've never said that. But the guy makes the throws and makes the plays when they need to be made. And I bring him up to say, I still don't know how much of the time they're making him really drop back and read a bunch. It's very rare that a Peyton Manning, a Tom Brady, a Drew Brees, and Aaron Rodgers are dropping back and looking at 2 or 3 or maybe 4 options and dicing you up. Like, I really feel like, I mean, I sit here and think about Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray, like that stuff. And like, even with Josh Allen at Buffalo. And I just feel like and it's smart football. Like, you know what I mean? Like, instead of having 3 or 4 options on a play, why don't you just make sure you got 2 options on a play that you know one's going to be there? It's kind of like, I don't want to say options, but you're kind of like picking, you're making one guy pick and he's going to pick wrong, kind of like a read option compared to, all right, well, we're going to run these 4 routes and whatever defense you get, then you know who's open.
Four quarters instead of 100 pennies.
Exactly. And so it's like, there's just, I don't think there's really a need for drop back passing necessarily for Hendon, except for in times of where I don't want to be a hypocrite, where I was mad in the Purdue game where it's 3rd and 2, and we literally run Princeton fan out as a decoy to try to hold the corners. And then they run 2 deep shots right next to each other on the side. And it's like, well, that's his only options. Like, I don't love that, but I'm like you, like, give me a few more options where it's Hendon's not dropping back and saying, oh, they're in cover 3. I can't take that. So I got to come back to my, underneath, or my guy that's supposed to be running a drag, but since it's zone, he turns and hooks up. Like I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't need him to have to be decisive. That just like, okay, I'm looking there, that corner went back, so it's up, or the corner came up, so it's deep. You know what I mean? So it's more like you said, they're very similar. It's similar to drop back and read a defense and know that you have 3 or 4 options, compared to drop back and read one person and know you have 1 or 2 options. It's very similar. It's kind of like in the same ballpark or same family, but I don't need Hendon to drop back and have to decipher between 3 or 4 guys. Like, Josh Heupel's really good at what he does. Like, just make sure, I just want Heupel to have options compared to we're dropping back and just letting him make a decision. I don't think there's
play with what you have.
Yeah, I just don't think there's many people that even do that anymore. I don't even know how many people in college do that. Honestly, like, maybe Bryce Young right now and maybe Stetson Bennett, and I can just say those because I've watched them recently. Like, I think they maybe have some drop back options, but
yeah, I think Mike Leach probably just leans into that. I mean, they throw it like 50 to 60 times a game. So
right. So, but yeah, I just need Hendon to hit the guys that are open. And I need Heupel to make sure he's got options for me on 3rd downs, and then also like 3rd and 4th down manageable, like short yardage.
Yes, so. Exactly. I completely agree with that. It's just Hendon is not a drop back quarterback.
Not many people.
That's not how I would define him.
Yeah.
So I want him to be better at other things.
And people don't need to take that the wrong way. We're not saying he's not he's not a good thrower of the football. We're saying he's not a drop back quarterback. Doesn't mean he can't throw well or he's not a pocket passer. We're talking about literally dropping back and deciphering a defense and where's your 1, 2, and 3 and 4 option.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, again, appreciate you guys for answering that tweet and giving us some questions to dive into. We love the interaction. But let's jump into the second half of the season. And boy, we are starting with a doozy in Ole Miss. Reed, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, I think for me, going into the first half of the first game of the second half, like, I feel like this was unfortunately like our Super Bowl. For me personally, my Super Bowl was Kentucky. But I mean, I hate Ole Miss, but I knew that they were a better team. Or I felt like they were a better team. And so for me, I just wanted to make sure we beat Kentucky, especially if we didn't get Ole Miss game. But I don't have a ton to say about this game, even though it was the wildest and craziest thing. Like, this game was what I expected because of what I've seen when we played Florida, when we played Pitt. You know, like, this team does have a little bit more talent. They got the better quarterback. It was an amazing atmosphere. I hate that what happened kind of overshadowed. The one thing that I did hate about this game was that usually, like I said on the other podcast, I love football. I can watch football all day, but I was getting annoyed as hell being in Neyland for 5.5 hours. It was just not enjoyable. And so for me, I loved the fight of the team. I thought they stepped up and made plays when they needed to keep it close. You know, and then there was a bunch of nonsense. So really, surprisingly, I don't have a ton to say about Ole Miss. Like, you know, I will say that this one was when we lost. Like, I was pretty mad, but I never expected us really to win that game. Like, if we had won that game, I would have been like ecstatic because I'd been like, holy crap, I wasn't expecting that.
Yes, I think I was in that same boat. I mean, they were favored. It was like, if we win this game, this will be absolutely massive for Coach Heupel, and be one of those, as people like to say, signature wins. So it just sucked the way that we lost. This was one of those games that, and we said in the first half, we felt good after a loss. This is one of those games I did not feel good after this loss.
I agree.
This is one that it was right there for us. We could have had it at any moment. And this was also the show of frustration that UT fans have had over the past 15 years in the football program. This was the accumulation of all that. This was the eruption of a volcano staying dormant for a long time. And it was just to say, we're tired of this. Like, we're tired of getting treated horribly. We're by the refs, by anybody. We're tired of losing. We're tired of Lane Kiffin, his narrative. You know, I think Tennessee fans would be happier if he just never coached another day in his life. So I think this game showed that this was the first loss that actually hurt of the season. And this, like, I just hate the fact that Lane Kiffin, and I don't necessarily – I've said it before that he's a good coach, and I don't want to say he's bad. But I'm not saying this Ole Miss team is great. Like, I know they won 10 games, and they went to New York Six Bowl, and I think some of it is just like fluff, because I think Hugh Freeze's Ole Miss teams would have killed this team like 10 times out of 10. And some of those, I mean, one of his teams that beat Alabama, they went 9-3, 9-4 after a loss in the bowl. Like, they didn't even win as many games. And I think they would crush this Lane Kiffin team. So I'm fed up with Kiffin and Ole Miss and all that BS. And I would be happy if I never saw his face again. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Yeah. This one I was more mad, obviously, because we lost, but I was just more mad because of everything that was around it. And it was just really dumb and stupid. So.
Yeah. And then also solidified that Milton is not it.
I wasn't even going to bring it up. I'm not trying to be mean. I just don't even really think about Joe Milton anymore. Like, it just, whatever.
I know. Okay. So big rivalry. Next game, Alabama. So lost to Alabama. They end up being number one team in the nation, end up in the college, national championship. And this is Alabama. So going into this game, it was seen almost like the Florida game going into it. Like, hey, I just want to smack them in the mouth. I just want to show that we're not to be pushed around. I just want to be competitive a little bit. And your point that you said multiple times, be in this game in the fourth quarter. And that's what happened. So back to what we said about the other losses, I felt good after this loss. And it felt as if it wasn't a horrible game. It wasn't like overall, like we sucked the entire game. It really did feel like the interception that Hendon threw, and they took it down to like the 1 or the 2, and then they ended up scoring, that sealed the game. One play really sealed the game because they were already up a touchdown. Then they score another one. Now they're up 14 and we're playing catch up. Like, that feels so much better than if it's just like us versus South Carolina or us versus Missouri. Like, if we're on the receiving end of that. So I was overall very happy with this game. And this, this was a message, I felt like, to the rest of the SEC that, like, Tennessee isn't just an easy win. Like, we just went to the wire with Ole Miss. We were just in the fourth quarter with Alabama. We're not the same Tennessee that you've seen in recent history.
Yeah, I just kind of echo that. I will always remember sitting outside on the porch watching the game, and when Cedric Tillman caught that ball, and it's just like, listen here, guys, like, we don't quit. Like, this team isn't going to quit. I love that we made plays. Javonte Payton hitting them on, they hit Javonte Payton on the deep shot, okey dokes, get in the end zone. We had a great special teams play to kind of get us jump started about stuff. But, like, we fought them, man. We just don't have the dogs. We don't have the horsepower yet, and that's okay. But I didn't expect anything else, and, like, so I was fine with it. I hate Bama. Like, I hate losing to them, but I'm not going to sit here and get all worked up thinking that we really should have ever had a chance to win the game. So,
yeah, exactly.
Next.
Next, yeah. We need about 25 to 30 more 5-stars to even line up with the amount of guys they have. So, yeah, the powerhouse of good talent they have is kind of ridiculous. All right. Moving into now looking back on it, the game of the year, and it's Kentucky. Kentucky being as highly rated as they were going into this game, and then, at 18, and then their confidence was so nice to feel, because I was nervous heading into this game for sure, because Kentucky was doing so well in the season. But watching games that they played in and watching teams that they played against, I saw that there was an opportunity for us. I saw that we have a chance to beat them. It's not like they're Alabama. It's not like they're Georgia. It's not like they're Florida. They're Kentucky. We beat them all the time. It's one of those teams that we just have their number. Like, it just is. So this, and it's so funny looking back, because we never talked about Kentucky as one of our games of the year. We didn't really think about it, and it ended up being one of the most important. And a few points is the end of half, the just brilliance of 3 plays in like 20 seconds, and we kicked a field goal, and that ended up being the difference in the game. Like, that helping me in the way I feel about Josh Heupel, like, just giving me more and more confidence in him. And then the bend don't break defense that we talked about earlier, and that's how we defined it. That is how the game ended. It was a bend don't break. We were giving up a lot of points, a lot of third downs, and then it got down to crunch time. It started long and fourth and long. We ran zero coverage, manned it up, and we stopped them. So it wasn't even an offensive score that won us the game, which is what we saw our team as, just an offensive team. It was a defensive stop that won us the game. So that was great to see out of this team. And I'm glad that we were able to just reiterate, like I said before, we're still Tennessee. Like, we're not going to let you win, Kentucky. You realize that, right? So
this is one. It was, man, one of my favorite games in a long time. I'll always remember this game for multiple reasons. I mean, it was the weekend that I was watching it at the bar / on my phone / in the club locker room, because we're at Ridgeway Country Club in Memphis for my Lee and Liz's and Bailey and Austin's double wedding, and at the reception. So I'm always going to remember that. And there's just it's one of those fun things. Like, you're at the wedding, you're drinking, you're eating, you're hanging out, but then you get to go watch a little bit of the game. And then, it just adds to a special night that they were able to pull it out and win. And I remember getting in the car and hearing Javonte Payton. It's like, wait, what? He just house called it first play. And then, like, I always will remember the Alontae Taylor play. And I feel like that play for Alontae was huge because, in my opinion, Alontae was a guy who came in with some pretty decent hype. And it was kind of dope to be like, all right, we got Bryce Thompson, we got Alontae Taylor. They're going to be both good corners, both play here a while, both solidify it. And I just thought Alontae had some, like, up and down times. And I feel like if he doesn't make that play against Kentucky, like, I at least look at his career different. Like, I look at him as just being a fighter and competitor, not very good. Like, meaning, like, I just think he's pretty average. Like, he got burnt, which happens to everybody. But, like, I would have said that he was very middle of the road, but that play kind of for him will be a solidifier for 20 years down the road. If he comes back to an alumni event and he's at Calhoun's and fans go up and see him, like, they're always gonna be like, hey, I remember your pick against Kentucky. Like, so for him personally, I think it was huge. And I just think that game, my buddy Jack, like, he really is the one that said it a couple of years ago to me. Now, you always say, like, it doesn't matter how good Kentucky is. We just always find a way to beat them and to be their nemesis. Not that they're not going to sometimes beat us. I mean, they over these past 5, 6, 7 years, they've definitely found ways to beat us and have been the better team. But, like, when we're looking at it as a whole, like, they're ranked. They're supposed to be having the best seasons that they've had in their history. And we're not very good, and they still can't beat us. And, like, a couple of years ago when Pruitt was here, they come in and they're like top 12, top 13, and we handle them with freaking JG at quarterback. So, or then when we had the goal line stand, and, so it's just amazing feeling. Like, doesn't matter how good you guys are. And that's how I felt going into this game. I was a little bit nervous because I was like, dang, I hate Kentucky. But I was like, dude, it's Kentucky. Like, no matter how good they actually are, like, we'll still find a way. And that's ended up what happened. So easily my favorite game of the year.
Yeah, I think if we went back and did, like, what, the most important games of the year, like, that's going to be number one. Because it was that game that there's, like, a bottom, a middle, and an upper tier of the SEC, and that was us passing the middle. You know what I mean? Like, beating South Carolina and Missouri, that's the bottom of the SEC. Vandy's down there, but, like, beating Kentucky, like, got us up past them, and put us, out of the 14 teams, number 7 or 6. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
Great win. Okay, then we go into Georgia. So, Georgia is the best defense in the country for a reason. They have 5 stars all over the freaking field. But until they played Alabama in the SEC championship, we scored the most points on them. I mean, excluding their game versus Alabama, we scored the most points on Michigan. Didn't even score as many points. 17 total from us. We're the only team to score a touchdown on the first drive versus them. No other team this year has done that. So this is one of those games you expect to lose, hoping that maybe you can smack in the mouth, which I think we did. And I think it was just that defense, man. I mean, they just absolutely crushed our running game. We couldn't get anything going on the ground. We ended up having 2 turnovers. So it's one of those games that doesn't necessarily define you. There are some things you can take from it that are positive, like I just said. But it shows you where you are at that moment and lets you know, okay, these are the big boys of the SEC, and this is what it's going to be like. So it's a great learning environment. It is a great game to learn from. So that's pretty much all I can say, because when you get beat by 41-17, when you get beat like that, like there's not much that you can say about that game. It's not like the other ones where it was one play away from being different. It's a rout. So what can you say?
Yeah, agreed. So going into this game, the game ended up being what I expected, but unfortunately, I watched that first drive and I'm like, you get, if you text somebody, the little eyes that are kind of looking like, whoa, hold up here. And so
the hopes all of a sudden went through the roof.
Yeah. And so and listen, the hopes never got for me like, oh my God, we have a chance to win. My hopes were like, well, we got a chance to make them uncomfortable and maybe make this a game for a little bit. But we go down and score, and my buddies are calling me, and they're like, let's fucking go. We're going to take it to them. We're going to punch them in the mouth. Like, let's go. Like, that's how we do. And then it's like, I'm starting to get fired up. And then it was the slow death. And so it was like, Reed, you shouldn't let yourself get your hopes up. But you did, and that's okay. But this game was what I expected and what I thought it was. So that's all I have to say on it. Like, kudos that we drove down and scored on them, dialed them up. Shows that Hype's the man, even when he's way under talent, when he's way under gun. I mean, he's going into that game with a pistol and Kirby Smart's over there with a tank, so it's like, so.
That is a great analogy, a pistol versus a tank.
Yeah. So we got like that first drive was like us sneaking up and like sticking our little pistol through like one of the little slots and like damaging, like getting a little wounded guy in the side. And then they just like, yeah. And then they just like just take it out.
That's great. All right, going to South Alabama. The best part about this game is that we became bowl eligible, which, like I said before, I did not expect to happen. I thought we'd win 5, if that. So another 60-point game, taking care of the teams we need to take care of. And I forgot about this, but we had 2 safeties. Like, has that ever happened before in a game? Like, I don't think that's a very common occurrence. Like, that has to be very rare. So, but it's the same as Tennessee Tech. It's the same as Bowling Green. Take care of those games that you're supposed to win. Now, before the year started, I did say this was my most important game. And my reasoning behind it was to get bowl eligibility, that it was an important game. And that's what happened. So I still feel like it was a more important game than Bowling Green or Tennessee Tech or Vandy. So it's not the top. It's not the most important game, but I think it's in the upper half. Let's say that.
All I'll ever remember about this game was the easiest money I've made in gambling in a long time, because I remember seeing the spread and it was something stupid. I swear it was like 28 or like 30, and I said, "What the F?" I said, "Usually I would think a Tennessee team would let a team like this hang around." I said, "But I've seen different this year. I think Heupel's different." I said, "I think we're going to go out and beat them, 49-7 or 52-7 or whatever." And so all I will remember is like, it's just the easiest bet, because we got a coach that coaches each week for its importance and to handle business and not to underestimate people. Next.
Next is Vanderbilt. Almost another like, hey, just take care of business game. Vandy had 2 wins at that point. One was versus UConn, the other worst team in the nation. So this was very much take care of business.
Can you imagine someone like you having to be a fan and going to watch the UConn versus Vandy? Like, I just would never.
Oh my God, it would be horrible.
I honestly think if someone was like, Reed, here is $250 cash, but you have to sit through the entire game, I don't think I would do it. Like, if I had to be there, I think my number for that would probably be $750. If someone said, here's $750, go watch the game, I would probably do it.
You have to be there for 3.5 hours and watch this game.
Yeah. Now, if they said you can't be on your phone, like you literally have to just sit there and like watch the game, I'm probably thinking $1,000 to $1,200. Because knowing me, if they said I couldn't have a phone, like I would maybe just try to there's plenty of seats, so I just try to lay down and like try to sleep. But yeah, I mean, Vandy's Vandy. I'm happy we won. I'm happy we handled business. So, anyways, what's your season recap? How do you feel?
Season recap. I feel great. Like I said, I expected, 5-7. We went 7-5 on the season. Ended up losing the bowl game to reasons out of our hands, I will say. But I feel absolutely amazing about the season. I feel so confident headed to next year. I feel that this team is above average, is a good team, and they have a chip on their shoulder because of this loss to Purdue. And that makes them dangerous. The fact that, the 3 games we lost, Pitt, Ole Miss, and Purdue, was an average of 5 points. An average of 5 points. 1 score. Say we flip those and we go, 10-3. Like, that's a completely different season. And it was so close. Sky's the limit. Only way is up. So I feel like we can very much improve. I think we're, losing guys that were very helpful to us, and Theo and Matthew Butler and Alante and Valus. But we're also keeping guys that are going to be great. 4 out of the 5 starting offensive linemen: Hendon, Cedric Tillman, Trey Flowers. Like, we're still going to be a good team and still going to be able to compete with these. And if certain breaks just go our way, then we can be pretty successful, and we can possibly get to a 9-win season and maybe a 10-win with a bowl game. Like, we can get to that point where we have another 10-win season, because it has literally been since 2007 that we've had one. So I feel like that is a possibility headed to next year. So I'm ecstatic. I was surprised with 7-5. If you asked August Kyler, he wouldn't have told you that. So very surprised with it and very happy in the direction we're headed.
For me, how much I love Heupel, and how much I enjoyed this team and these players. But I'm going to say it was a very good year, but I will not say amazing or great. I think it was, I will say it was I'll say this. I will say it was a great year because of what happened last year, what happened in the off season, and what I saw at spring practice and fall camp. But I will not say it's an incredible or amazing. So for me, it would be, the levels would be good, great, and then incredible or amazing. For me to have it to be an incredible or amazing season, you beat Pitt and you beat Ole Miss. Okay? And I'm not going to say beat Purdue, because if you beat Pitt and Ole Miss, you're not playing Purdue. You're not playing the Music City Bowl. So for me, if he somehow won both of those games, or say we lost to Pitt the way we did, but then we came back and beat Ole Miss, then I would say it was a amazing season. I'll say it was great, but not amazing or incredible. And I couldn't be more excited with where we're going. I can never remember in my life going into a Saturday and being confident in a team. I'm usually always that nervous optimism with Tennessee. Like I'm kind of like, no. Usually I'm nervous, and sometimes I'm like, yeah, this isn't going to go well. And other times I'm like, no, we'll be okay. But I've never really until this year gone into a game and be like, no, like I'm very confident in us. Like I'm at least confident in what team is going to show up, that we're going to show up, play hard, be good offensively, make plays offensively, bow our necks on defense. Like, so it was a different confidence I had this year, like kind of like a confidence I have with the Titans. Like I know when we got Braves and we got a bunch of those dogs on offense and defense, like we might lose the game, but like, we're going to have a really, really good chance. And so great season, not amazing just because, like I said, Pitt and Ole Miss, if you win those games, and it's amazing and incredible. But going into next year, I'm really excited. I still, even though I love Coach Hype, I'm still jury's slightly out on him for in my opinion, on some people, because I think some people still want to get back to competing for SEC championships, competing for national championships. Is he ever going to get us there consistently? Bro, I don't know. And that's not a knock on him. I think it's just, I just think there's literally like 3 or 4 coaches that can do that. Like, I think, I think obviously Nick Saban, Ryan Day, just because he's at Ohio State, Dabo Swinney because he's at Clemson and he's done it, and then I will give Brian Kelly a chance because he's a good coach, but also because he's at LSU, and LSU is a different breed. Now, those are the only 3 or 4 people I'm saying. You notice I didn't say Jim Harbaugh or Jim Harbaugh, because I don't ever see Michigan really ever competing consistently. Like, I'll be surprised if they beat Ohio State again. So, like, it's not a knock on Hype. I'm just saying, like, in college football right now, there's literally probably 3 or 4 teams that are going to have a chance every year. Other than that, like, enjoy your one-offs when you have a chance. Like, enjoy your one-offs when you get there, because it's probably going to be another 3 or 4 years until it happens. And that's until Nick Saban retires and, whatever else happens. And same thing with Georgia. Like, I don't think Kirby's that good of a coach, but he's done well enough to get enough talent that he has since he's been at Georgia. I mean, he's played in SEC championships, been to the Natties, been to college playoffs. So, like, not a knock on Hype. I just think it's still a long road to go to get where some people want to get, except for me. Like, at some point, I will be happy because I'm going to try to be realistic. Like, bro, if we're winning 9 and 10 games a year, and say we fast forward 4 or 5 years, and in 5 years from now, we're looking at year 5 of Josh Heupel, and he has 2 to 3 10-win seasons, and some people are starting to ruffle their feathers and say, hey, he's not going to get us there. Like, you really got to take a look at the landscape of college football and be like, well, is anyone really ever going to get us there until Saban's gone or until whoever else, and kind of things maybe change a little bit? And that's why I'm like, Heupel's great for me because I do trust him and think he's a good coach. I just don't want people to think that in 3 years we should be in the SEC championship game, because I don't, you know what I mean? Like, just enjoy the goodness, and don't let the fact that we're probably not going to be the late 90s and early 2000s like we used to be. I'm not saying we don't have a chance. I'm just saying don't hold that to be the expectation. Like, enjoy beating Florida, and enjoy hopefully upsetting Alabama or competing with Georgia, but don't make it to where we have to beat those teams every year or you're canning this guy. You know what I mean? Like, so don't let it get out of hand.
I agree with what you're saying, and it's like people want the dynasty, like people want a lot of championships, but like, you look back over time, there really haven't been that many dynasties in college football. There's more in NFL, but not college football. There's not dynasties like that. And then
don't be, and listen, and just be happy that we had a run at Tennessee. Tennessee had a great run. Tennessee had a great run, like a Notre Dame run or a USC run or a Bama run or a Florida run, a Clemson run of now. Like, we had that. So, like, we can at least say we had it. Nebraska can at least say they have it. Doesn't make it fun that we might not ever see it again in our lifetime, but at least it happened. But don't let us fire a good coach because we think there's a great one out there. Because I do think that if you give Hype enough time, I think he can if some things change. And the only other thing I got to wait and see is if I know he can do it game day. I just got to see if he can get guys in here. I mean, and that's the difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you need to get to that next level. And I what Saban has done since he's got there has never been done before. Like, college football has been being played for 150 years, and no one's ever done what he's done. So you cannot compare your team to his. Like, he is the greatest coach in college football history. You cannot compare your team to his. I would be happy with getting to a couple of SEC championships, maybe winning one, winning 10 games in a season. Like, I would be very much happy with that. Our run that you just talked about, we won one national championship. So, and everyone was happy back then, and everyone wants it to be back to that. We only won one. So
hey, that's why I always say that Fat Phil's overrated. But hey, that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, exactly. So say Heupel's here for 15 years and he wins one.
It'd be incredible. It'd be
incredible that he wins
a statue
one.
Of him.
But it's a very hard thing to do. I think it depends on Nick Saban, retiring or leaving or just dying. I think it literally depends on that. I wouldn't say it depends on Kirby at all, because we've talked about it before. You can't necessarily trust him to be a good coach. He's a great recruiter, but so I mean, I'd be very happy if we made it to 4, maybe 5 SEC championship games, won 2 of them over the next 15 years. Very happy. I would love that. And who cares if we have a random season where we go 7-5?
And if people want to get mad at you and say, wow, 15 years and you're only expecting that, well, just look back at the past 15 years. So
exactly.
All right, I'm gonna finish this. I'm gonna read this quick. I just think these are some cool little season stats. So this year, 2021 points per game, 39-31. I mean, 30. So basically 40 points, 39 points a game. Last year, bro, 21. That's crazy. We were putting up 21 in like 5 minutes of games sometimes in these first quarters, like we were talking about with Missouri and Kentucky. Points against this year.
That's almost double.
Right. Exactly. Points against, we were giving up 29 points a game. And you know what? Like, it sounds crazy, but the fact that we were keeping it under 30 in this year, in this time of college football, like, that's kind of nice. Like, it's not, listen, don't get me wrong. Like, I don't want that. Like, I want it to be lower, but whatever. Like, and then last year we were giving up 30 points a game. So we actually had some improvement after losing all those guys and losing a defensive minded coach. Like, we improved it slightly. Yards this year per game, 511 yards a game this year compared to 215. I mean, that's more than double.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the yards that our defense was giving up, 378. Once again, it's crazy to say this, Kyler, but if you tell me we're playing a game and the other team's going to score 29 points and have 378 yards of offense, I think we win that game.
Yeah.
So and then we were giving up last year 301 yards. Okay, our total this a little bit is something that I think is a very cool stat, because going into the year we tried to preach to these people like, hey, he's not just going to throw it all over the field. Like, he very much will be balanced and run the ball. So our rushing yards for this year as a team were 3,139. Our stats for passing this year was 3,342.
Wow.
So that is really, really balanced. And obviously, if you want to compare that to last year, we only had 1,600 yards rushing as a team.
That's insane. I did not think it was that bad.
Derrick Henry does that in 1 year. Our passing last year was only 2,000 yards.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Okay. Now we have rushing yards per game this year, 217. And this is the other one that's kind of in line with what I just read. Our passing, this is the only one that really kind of surprised me. Our passing per game this year was only 257. I thought we'd been like 270, 280, close to 300. But once again, it shows that he runs a very balanced offense. I did not write those numbers down for last year. Don't care. Once again, listen to this. Our season attempt for rushing yards, so how many times we attempted rushing this year, was 577 times. Now, you got to think that's because of running back and quarterback. And the times we passed this year was only 376 was our attempts. Not complete. That's just our attempts. So once again, like, these are some pretty kind of like interesting numbers. Like, I'm assuming you would have thought that we probably passed it 500 times and maybe only rushed it 370. But those, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So those numbers are flipped. Now, penalties actually weren't as bad as I thought. 60 yards a game in penalties. That's not great, but that's a hell of a lot better than some of those when we were having in the 100 and 120, 150 yards. Last year, we were about right at the exact same, 59.92. So, not much difference there.
And honestly, if you look at it, we should have had more penalties this year than last year because you had
more plays.
You had more plays, yes, but you had experienced older guys on last year's team, and this year's team was all new, all new guys. Only a few had experience, and
Good
that's
point.
where you run into it. New starters, new guys on the team. That makes it even easier to have those kind of penalties. So it's actually like pretty great that it stayed.
All right. Yeah. No, good point. Good point. Okay. Here's a good one. Time of possession. I'll let you guess just for fun. So what do you think our time of possession per game was?
So the South Carolina game and the Missouri game is making me think it was under half, and I want to say like 28.
Our minutes per game that we possessed, it was 24. Not a bad guess. So
24. That's even.
Yeah,
Wow.
not. You were close. Not a bad guess. And the opposing team had it for 35 minutes a game. So 24 per game, like that's not. I'm fine with that for how we rush our offense. And like, what do I care about time of possession in the Missouri game, in the South Carolina game? Like, I don't give a dang. Like, it doesn't matter. We're blasting them. So, 24 is probably not bad. Like, that's not, not horrendous. Now, these are the last little bit of stats. So our third down conversion and our fourth down conversion, do you want to take a guess on those?
Third down all year, we were over 50%. So I want to say maybe like 55 or maybe near 50. And then fourth down, I would guess maybe like 30% on fourth down.
So I think you got these backwards. So our third down conversion was 44.69. So a little bit lower than you thought, but our fourth down was right at 50%. It was 48.39.
Wow.
So to be 48% on fourth down, like that's pretty nice. Like if we're going for it twice, we're probably gonna get one of them. So that's pretty strong.
I mean, that's the kind of stuff that has never been seen in college football. That never happened before. Everyone always punted. You never went for it on fourth down because you were barely ever going to make it. And this guy's 50%.
Well, and Kyler, the other thing you got to keep in mind of, how many of those fourth downs were when the game was already in the balance and you just went for it and it was 4th and 16? Like, you knew you weren't going to get it, but you're already losing to Georgia or Alabama or whoever. Or maybe it's a closer game towards the end and you don't have any timeouts and you need to go for one. Like, so you don't really remember, like, so that I thought that stat's pretty strong. I would like to see third down conversion come up some. And that's all because of, I felt like we got in a lot of manageable third downs this year. So I'd like to see that number come up a little bit closer to 50. But it's, the third down conversion is still better than our opponents. Our opponents were 42% and we were 44%. So not bad. And then I will say our opponents were a little bit better on fourth down. They were at 52.78. So that's a decent difference. But once again, you don't know how many times they actually go for it. So I would rather be better on third down than on fourth down, because you're going for more third downs than fourth downs. But anyways, I thought those were some interesting stats. Like I said, a great season. And to be honest, to wrap this thing up for me, as good as the offensive was, it was still better than I expected. I thought he would be good. I didn't think he'd be this good. I was still very leery. Like, I thought he would score points. I didn't think it'd be this easy. I didn't think he'd have guys running wide open against Florida, Bama, Georgia. You know, I didn't think that he would come out and, you know, absolutely take them out to the woodshed against Missouri and South Carolina. And then our defense was a hell of a lot better than I expected. And people can come at me and say, well, look at the stats, look at this, look at that. I don't care. I watched the game with my eyes, and that defense played well enough to win us certain games. And I did not trust Tim Banks at all, but I thought him. And one other thing, I never thought I'd be finishing the pod with this. I think you got to give a lot of credit to the special teams, because necessarily, like, we didn't have great punt returns and great kick returns. We obviously had some good ones. But the fact that we blocked, I guess, 2 punts in 2 major games that were game changers, I can't remember the last time that's happened in a long time.
Yeah.
You know, and then
Coach Eckler.
Yeah. And then, like, yeah, I wish our field goals would have been a little bit better, but I mean, I'm not really going to knock that guy for not being able to make a 56-yarder, like, or 50, whatever. Like, he shouldn't have been out there. So anyways, like, overall, I you know, I'm not going to say I couldn't be happier, because I could be happier, obviously, if we beat Pitt and Ole Miss, but I'm very, 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 very appreciative and happy of what this season was for us.
Yeah, me too. It exceeded expectations for sure. So that's it, man. That is the recap. That is our thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. Hit that like button. Hit that notification bell, so it lets you know when we're putting videos out every Wednesday. If you're on the podcast platforms, please rate and review and follow and download those podcasts. It helps so much with our numbers. And if you want to contact us, 865-322-9232 is a phone number, and bleavintennesseefootball@gmail.com is the email. And also follow us on social media, interact with us on social media, send us messages, DMs, respond to our tweets. We love it. We love to answer your questions. Loved answering the ones on this pod today. So that's at Kyler Kerberson, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, at rbacon26 on Twitter, at Believe in Tennessee on Twitter for our main account. As always, presented by betonline.ag. So head on over there if you're betting on anything, any sport, any game. They got it all. So appreciate it. As always, go Vols.